Welcome to the 23rd episode of Rivanna Review, a program of stories, essays, art, and book reviews. My name is Robert Boucheron. I will be your host for a half hour of reading aloud with illustrations and author photographs. The print magazine Rivanna Review is published 4 times a year in Charlottesville, Virginia on the Rivanna River. The magazine is available in bookstores on the Main Street Mall in Charlottesville and elsewhere in Virginia. You can order a copy or a subscription from the website, rivannareview.com. Contributors to the magazine live all over the world and they write about places far and wide. This episode has a story by the French poet Paul Verlaine about a literary cafe in Paris in the 1880s. 4 book reviews start in Charlottesville with stories by local author Jody Hobbs Hessler. We then breeze through the flash fiction by Anthony Varallo, the historic cities of Charleston and Savannah, and the life of Edgar Allan Poe. We return home for the news from Habsburg, where elderly cousin Tony arrives to recuperate after Mardi Gras. Story, Literary Cafe by Paul Verlaine. In an imaginary city, picture to yourself a cafe not at all like a modern dive. No Renaissance stained glass windows, no sketches on the walls, no verse recitations, not even ribald ones, and some among the latter more than that, but very street smart, very much in the know about current events, above all, very unusual. But is that really a shame? The signboard of this literary cabaret is improbably white and gold, the flight, understood, of course, as toward the ideal. Nothing to do with the earth, oh no. The location lies at the crossroad of the ode, and it shelters, apart from outdated politicians, laughable puppets, as the song from Picardy goes, a hand-picked group, very select, of elite poets and true prose writers. To this place, to quaff glasses of cold coffee, sweetened with sugar that is not broken into lumps, as is the custom in France, but reduced to powder in imitation of those hot climates where they drink it with milk not fermented, or in a grog with water, or sometimes, by a vexatious exception, in some strong digestive diluted, come young persons whose first names follow. Leo, short, influential in the meeting, black of beard and long of hair, a very fine wit who tells gross anecdotes. Albrecht, tall, who despite his Germanic first name has all the allure, the freedom, and the tone of a hidalgo, as brave as his sword, and Pablo, another reader of Spanish who would no longer be a Sancho, tall like the foregoing, but with a tendency to self-effacement and silence. Many others as well, without counting rare appearances, Franz the Illustrious, the 2 Tremonts, the 2 Curat, and 2 doctors, no more quacks than Albrecht or Pablo, and the rest, one flaxen like Heinrich Heine, god of the place, the other with an accent of Jasmin or Mistral, both of them good poets anyway, not less than accomplished practitioners. Moreover, some youths, and some even younger, Lavallière, Pinson, Mouron. These are their names, as first names are for the old men who do not wish to be recognized. Very wide awake, anyway, these little birds, eaglets perhaps. At least I think so. Yes, after they have tried their wings. But yes, there is always a but. What an attitude they have in there. It's amazing, as such and such declared in one of his rare effusions. A Frenchman from the north, a bit bohemian and very familiar. He is a good boy at heart, although he believes he is a little nobler than he really is. In brief, an entire world. What? Machin would add. Machin, this errant, who is not a knight, who has even ceased to be errant, but who could call himself Don Quixote with the same first name as Pablo, his most intimate friend, if not indeed the best. Oh yes, what a wealth of attitude in the tavern of the Flight. For despite their talent, held in high esteem, especially at the Flight, I very strongly fear that Villon, Musset, Shakespeare, and even the sweet Briseux, who drank cider, would never be admitted to this choice company. Phantoms, not good, so there. Ponsard neither, for example, and he not for his scandalous disorder, but because of his absolute lack of talent. And that would be justice. Midnight rings from the belfry. It sounds, resounds, and resounds, and nobody, they hear it all too well, from the bosom of well-being at this treacherous signal wants to disappear. How good they feel! 1 o'clock, 1:30 o'clock. They close the shutters, and eyelids have a tendency to flutter like wings, gray birds with black wingtips. Good night. Until Monday, I'll be there. But with the proper attitude, I think you dispersal toward roughly all quarters of the imaginary city. Book review by Carol Cutler, What Makes You Think You're Supposed to Feel Better? Stories by Jody Hobbs Hessler. This collection of 17 short stories set in present-day Central Virginia, near the Blue Ridge Mountains, has frequent references to places: Afton Mountain, Charlottesville, Zion Crossroads, the University of Virginia, and a lodge near the Appalachian Trail that sounds like Big Meadows on the Skyline Drive. The author's descriptions are lively and fresh. The book is full of engaging characters, and the variety of narrators is skillfully managed, with points of view that range from an 8-year-old child to the attitude and unpredictable behavior of teens, to older people coping with life. The title, What Makes You Think You're Supposed to Feel Better?, reveals a common thread. When people strive for redemption, prestige, peace of mind, solitude, and adventure, a sense of entitlement will not get them very far. In the story Sorry Enough, Buckley, a man just released from prison, comes to the door of Ida, the older black woman he crippled and left for dead after a hit-and-run accident. He is hoping to, quote, make things better for her, unquote, by working as a handyman while hiding his true identity. When she reluctantly allows him to work in her yard, he encounters suspicion, disgust, arrogance, and hostility, her black neighbors who wonder what a white man is doing there. Buckley tells his former girlfriend, "I thought maybe if I did a bunch of stuff for her, I could be sorry that way." The girlfriend responds, "Buckley, you could never be sorry enough." It is not by the work he does to help Ida, but by her compassion that Buckley begins to understand the depth of her character and the forgiveness for which he yearns. In Alone, a housewife and mother, Pearl, temporarily finds relief from the demands on her time and body in the example of the solitary life of a neighbor, Bean, whose life has ended by suicide. Bean's body was not found for weeks, and Pearl regrets not making more of an effort to be connected to him. However, she remembers he told her once he preferred his hermit life, which included the company he found with online computer game friends. Pearl's attempt to escape her own hectic and demanding family life by becoming absorbed in what Bean's life might have been like, alone without the demands of others, is confusing and alarming to her family and friends. In Sweetness, a teenager tells how his father and co-workers are invited to a party at the upscale home of their boss. Quote, "Our dads swapped the usual grease-stained old jeans and liquor ad t-shirts for polos and khaki pants. Everyone here was better than us, down to the tan and white pebbles of the half-long driveway that led up past their swimming pool to their shining glass house," unquote. The narrator knows the boss's daughter from school, but, quote, "she was too smart and pretty and rich to act like she knew any of us back," unquote. When Juliet goes into the glass house to change into her bathing suit, 2 of the boys attempt to spy on her, but Juliet foils their efforts. Later, she mocks the boys, as well as her social climbing father, as she reveals all in the swimming pool. She tells him, "It's all about showing off, isn't it? I can show off too." Book review, What Did You Do Today? Stories by Anthony Varallo. Anthony Varallo is the author of a novel and 4 previous story collections, 3 of which were prize winners, meaning they were the only fiction title published that year by that press. What Did You Do Today is another prize winner of this kind. American literary fiction has shifted away from commercial magazines and book publishers to university presses. The books are beautifully produced, but hard to find. The title story first appeared in the New Yorker magazine during the COVID-19 pandemic as a parody of a diary entry. It begins, quote, "I woke up early and checked my phone. No texts, but 3 emails, CVS, Old Navy, and the Biden campaign. Apparently Joe was concerned not to see my survey responses to his last email," unquote. Deceptively plain English and deadpan humor are Varallo's modus operandi. In this he rivals James Thurber and E.B. White, classic humorists and New Yorker writers of a century ago. All but 2 of the 45 stories here are very short, a few pages. Since 1992, this kind of story has been called flash fiction, to imply it is over in a flash. Popular with young writers, flash fiction encourages experiments and special effects, like surrealism. Ideally, it gives the reader a complete story, not a snippet, though this quantity of flash fiction published online often falls short of the ideal. Varallo delivers quality. The book leads with Overheard, which begins, quote, "My girlfriend and I were at a restaurant together, on the verge of breaking up again, and when the man at the table next to ours leaned over and said, 'Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation.' The man sides with the girlfriend, a server appears with cocktails on a tray and does the same, then the maitre d' and the busboy weigh in, followed by the sous chef, sommelier, line cook, parking valet, and hostess. The couple escapes and, quote, 'A week later we were engaged,' unquote." Varallo teaches creative writing at the College of Charleston in South Carolina. He is originally from Delaware, and he pokes fun at the first state in a mock guide to Delaware customs and culture. For example, quote, "It is not appropriate to compliment someone on their new hairstyle," unquote. Instead say, quote, "What the hell happened to your hair?" unquote. In Delaware, drivers keep their license plates for life. No one talks about their job, and to go to the beach is to go down shore, no matter which direction you drive. Quote, "In Delaware, shoppers do not chat with cashiers. Sales are strictly a business transaction, nothing more. The shopper wishes to suggest, through an exaggerated search for their credit card, not only that the price is too high, but also that it is somehow probably the cashier's fault. The cashier knows this." The story's grandfather, Wattage, and the other mothers mine the same streak of cantankerousness, while Interview turns an awkward job review upside down. It ends, quote, "They rehired me on the spot. I'm in sales now, low 6s, quote. A few stories seem to be outtakes from Varallo's novel The Lines, about a family going through divorce. The characters include the boy, age 7, and dreamy, his sister, the girl, age 13 and anxious, the moody mother, the father's hot young girlfriend, and babysitter who smokes. The kids hide her cigarettes, play mini-golf, and eat a forbidden piece of cake. The 2 normal-length stories at the end are glum. A young woman at college loses her virginity to a doofus boyfriend. Another is failing in all senses. You can skip them if you want. Book review, Charleston and Savannah, History, by Thomas D. Wilson. Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia, are 2 of the oldest cities in the United States, founded in 1670 and 1733. Filled with historic architecture, they are centers of wealth and culture, models of city planning, and popular tourist destinations. For all the guidebooks, you still might ask how these 2 cities came to be, how they grew and changed over time, and how they function today. Thomas D. Wilson, a planner and independent scholar near Nashville, is here to answer your questions. In the tradition of Lewis Mumford, he makes a serious attempt to explain more than 3 centuries of urban history, from the English colonial founders through development as seaports, exploitation of surrounding land as plantations, industrial growth and stagnation, up to current issues of preservation and social inequality. Located about 100 miles from each other, Charleston and Savannah are not twin cities, but they have much in common. Both are located at the mouth of a river or rivers in a coastal region called the Low Country. In the colonial and pre-Civil War era, both relied heavily on African slave labor, which began in Virginia, but developed as a system in Barbados. Both cities did a brisk trade by sea, the famous triangular route by the North Atlantic to Europe, down to West Africa, west to the Caribbean, and back home. Coupled with inland settlement, this trade made them wealthy. For Wilson, another important sameness is that both were planned cities from the start. He devotes many pages to descriptions of the two plans, analysis of their strong and weak points, and alleged benefits over the centuries. Savannah's plan was much more than a unique layout of rectangular blocks and parks. It was also a utopian and egalitarian project that wealthy landowners later subverted. Philadelphia, Annapolis, and other American colonial cities were planned, but Wilson does not mention them. He frequently mentions the elevated and inland site of Savannah as a healthy advantage over its low-lying sister, prone to tropical storms, floods, and disease. Much of what we think of as Southern culture, tradition, politics, and mythology was invented in Charleston, Wilson argues, adopted by Savannah, and exported in the early 1800s to the states of South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Charleston, prototype for the Deep South cultural economy, is the chapter that makes this argument. Wilson quotes from writers of the time who wanted to justify slavery, assert their own rights, and praise their aristocratic society. The cultural economy was essentially the plantation system, with its large population of enslaved Africans, dependence on a few commercial crops like rice and cotton, and elite class of white male owners. New Orleans was another important economic and cultural driver, with its own sea trade and foreign ties, but the wealth and political power of Charleston and Savannah were decisive in national disagreements leading to the Civil War. Today, the cities are relatively small, while Atlanta and Charlotte dominate the region. The survival of the historic core of both cities owes much to their economic nosedive after the Civil War. Wilson skips lightly over this period of about 100 years to a reawakening around 1970. The last chapter returns to analysis in depth of urban economies, politics, and historic preservation. Wilson compares the relative success of the two cities in dealing with the benefits and headaches of tourism, notes the port expansion in both, and seems to prefer Savannah as a place to live, Charleston as a place to visit. Maps, charts, statistics, and photographs are helpful throughout. Book review: Fallen Angel, The Life of Edgar Allan Poe by Robert Morgan. Robert Morgan packs a rare combination of skills. He is an accomplished scholar, recently retired as professor of English at Cornell University, and author of Boone, a biography on the frontier hero Daniel Boone. He is a best-selling fiction writer of the novel Gap Creek and more novels and stories set in the mountains of his native North Carolina. He is also a poet with several published collections. In Fallen Angel, Morgan turns his skills on the multi-talented Edgar Allan Poe. There are plenty of biographies, and Morgan seems to have read them all. He cites personal letters from and to Poe, newspapers, official records, comments by people who knew Poe, and passages from the poems and stories. It's an impressive feat that implies a lifetime of study. Yet all this research resulted in a book that is readable, with an original insight on every page. Poe was born in 1809 in Boston to a couple who were stage actors, and he died in 1849 in Baltimore under mysterious circumstances. He passed a childhood in Richmond, Virginia, and London, England, amid wealth and fashion. He received the best education a boy could get, and he was an excellent student. His adult life was a constant struggle with poverty and social blunders. He was an alcoholic who stayed sober for long stretches. He fell in love with countless women and married a girl of 13, probably to maintain his tie to her mother and his aunt, Maria Clem. From his teens, Poe wrote a great deal, teaching himself how and inventing new forms like the horror tale, the detective story, and the literary article. He had a brief military career. He worked for newspapers in Baltimore, Richmond, Philadelphia, and New York, and he perpetrated hoaxes. Morgan describes all this in vivid detail. He draws interesting parallels between Poe and American writers of the same era, like Hawthorne, Emerson, and Whitman. From the introduction, a quote gives a sense of the content and tone. Quote, "While many students of Poe argue for the unity of his work and attempt to show a consistent development of his thought and art, I would also stress some of the diversity of his thought and writing. There are indeed themes that extend throughout the body of his work: his fascination with mesmerism, premature burial, the imp of the perverse, his Byronic melancholy, his relish for the funereal, his poetics of sickness and madness, his love of codes and code breaking, and the attraction and dread of marriage. Poe celebrated the artificial and the otherworldly, but could also pay exhilarating tribute to natural beauty. At the other times, logic, mathematics, deduction, analysis, and encryption dominated his attention." From the introduction, again, in recent years, there has been a renaissance of Poe criticism, addressing a number of contemporary concerns, such as the influence of slavery on Poe's writing, the culture of reprinting in antebellum America, the effect of imperialist and expansionist policies on Poe's thought, Poe's implicit critique of capitalist economics and politics, and the ways Poe's writing can be understood through the approach of queer theory. Unquote. The drama, the pathos, and the clever wit are all here to savor. Poe, the troubled genius, is as fascinating to read about as he is to read. News from Hapsburg, Cousin Tony. The family sat at the dining room table. Cousin Tony had washed his face and run a wet comb through his hair, which clung in gray strands to his scalp. "Eleanor, you've outdone yourself," he said. "Everything is sumptuous." "Was Mardi Gras as crowded as last year?" Eleanor asked. "So far as I could see. Every year it grows. Another parade, more floats and marchers. The hotels are packed, the streets are jammed with people, and you can't go anywhere. Business grinds to a halt." "Except for bars and restaurants," Armistead said. "Yes, sir." "Did you make costumes again?" Emily asked. "I designed, sewed, padded, fitted, altered, and accessorized. My fingers are worn down to nubbins, but that's what I was placed on this earth to do, to make others look fabulous." "Who was your client this year?" Armistead asked. "The crew of Xerxes. It's a private club, very exclusive. Their theme is ancient Persia, liberally interpreted." "Someday I'd like to go to New Orleans to see for myself," Emily said. "You must," Cousin Tony said, "with the proper escort." "Cousin Tony, you hardly touched your plate," Eleanor said. "Can I get you something else?" "1,000 pardons, my dear. I gorged on airline snacks and cannot do justice to your delicious meal. If you permit, I will retire directly." Armistead pushed his chair back and offered to assist. "Sir, you overwhelm me," Cousin Tony said. He shook off his host's arm, wended his way out of the dining room, and slowly climbed the stair. The next day, the girls went off to school, and Eleanor took up a breakfast tray. Cousin Tony lay in bed, dozing and leafing through a magazine. His suitcases were open, their contents strewn across the room. He picked at a slice of toast and wet his lips with a cup of tea. "I'm afraid my appetite is tardy. It was always fickle, and look at me, lazy bones." "You came to rest," Eleanor said, "not to worry." "Thank you, Eleanor. You were always my favorite." Cousin Tony roused himself by noon. Eleanor had to go out, so she left a sandwich on a plate with a note, "Help yourself to anything you want." He made a cup of tea, nibbled the sandwich, and stared out the window. The sun was out, but the garden had nothing to admire. He glanced at the weekly newspaper. The front page carried a story about the county landfill and how new regulations might impact it. "If that's the most burning issue in this town," he said. Back in his room, Cousin Tony spent the afternoon unpacking. He shook out the hanging items and smoothed the folded items. Eleanor had cleared out the dresser and closet, which was liberally stocked with wooden and padded hangers. A more thoughtful hostess could not exist. By 4:30, everything was stowed away and the suitcases were shoved in the dark recess of the closet. An antique jewelry chest sat on the bed beside Cousin Tony. He was presentable, in a pale blue cotton shirt and charcoal gray trousers with matching oxblood leather belt and loafers. When the girls returned from school, they went straight to his room. Emily was almost as excited as her younger sister. "What did you bring us from Mardi Gras?" Bug asked. "You will never guess," he said. "Bead necklaces, doubloons, and pieces of 8? Much better than that." He patted the chest. "Pirate treasure?" "You're getting warm." In an agony of suspense, Bug extended her arms beseechingly. Emily twitched with laughter. Cousin Tony turned a little key in the chest. "Both of you close your eyes and don't open them until I say." He drew out a diamond necklace, draped it on Emily's neck, and fastened the clasp. Then he took a tiara of pearls and placed it on Bug's forehead. "All right, you can look now." The girls stared at each other in amazement, then rushed for the mirror that hung over the dresser. Bug was too short to see more than the tip of the tiara. "It's not fair," she wailed. "Stand on this," Cousin Tony said, moving a stool. "It's beautiful," Emily said. "Eyes tight, there's more." Cousin Tony selected jeweled rings and slipped them on the girls' fingers. Bracelets and bangles followed, gold and diamond earrings, a sapphire necklace for Bug, and a tiara set with a constellation of diamonds for Emily. "There," he said, "covered with gold and gems almost as precious as you are." Bug danced sedately in place, as she imagined a princess would do, while Emily gazed in the mirror, transfixed. "These belonged to my grandmother Antoinette Guillon. She was the queen of Mardi Gras the year of her engagement, and therefore entitled to gifts from her court. In those days, such gifts were genuine jewels, the finest to be had in New Orleans. Sterling silver was considered low class. Antoinette received pure gold, flawless diamonds, and other valuable gems, the very same ones you are wearing." At dinner, Cousin Tony played with his fork and sipped a glass of water. He entertained the Cloughs with stories of life in New Orleans, the same ones he had told Eleanor decades before. No matter how far-fetched, they always ended with the phrase, "And every word is true. St. Peter be my witness."